Good day, colleagues. My name is Dr. Tshwane from the Tshwane University of Technology based in South Africa. I will be presenting a paper that was co-authored between myself, Dr. Tshwane, as well as Dr. Enoch Zenzile. And the title of our paper is the encapsulation of traditional leaders in the onslaught of gender-based violence in their jurisdictions. So basically, we tapped into the space of gender-based violence in South Africa, which was declared a rifle globally. Every country and every continent is experiencing gender-based violence. Therefore, we tapped into it and analyzed how can the House of the Traditional Leaders in South Africa assist in curbing the scourge of gender-based violence within their jurisdictions. And in my introduction, we tapped into the fact that South Africa is facing the scourge of gender-based violence. There are different forms of gender-based violence as postulated by EIGE 2021, which includes, but not only limited to, verbal, psychological, emotional, and physical abuse, which simply means there are different types of gender-based violence that takes place within South Africa that were identified. It is not only limited to only being shouted at or being, abused emotionally or physically. There are so many types of gender-based violence that victims of South Africa has brought to our attention in South Africa. And in reaction to the outlined forms of gender-based violence, there are different legislations developed as an attempt to onslaught the phenomena of gender-based violence in South Africa. There is a legislation of criminal law amendment of 38 of 2007, as well as the National Council of Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act number 9 of 2024, Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Act of 12 of 2021, and Criminal Law, open bracket, Sexual Offense and Related Matters, close bracket, Amendment Act number 13 of 2021, and as well as the Domestic Violence Act. All of these acts were introduced with a plan or with an intention of us assisting to curb the gender-based violence in South Africa. Despite all these national laws that we have in South Africa, effort by several civil society and non-governmental organizations to end GBV remains a challenge in the country. So despite all these laws, all these acts, all these legislations that have been implemented by the South African government, we still are experiencing gender-based violence in South Africa. Therefore, the country is considered to be the capital within the world of rape cases, as well as one of the top 5 leading countries when it comes to gender-based violence. The GBV continues to bring to notice the social fabric of rural communities, and traditional leaders hold a unique position in influencing community norms, attitude, and beliefs, as well as cultural practices which contribute to prevention and reduction of the phenomena. So we've got in South Africa, it's a country that is based on tradition a lot. So our South African people, particularly in all the 9 provinces that we have in South Africa, we do have what we call rural areas. Rural areas, it's where the citizens of South Africa mainly rely or still strongly believe on the ruling of the chief. They've got what we call chieftaincy. Those are the leaders within the group, rural areas where it's a particular person has been appointed as a chief, meaning they set the rules of how people need to conduct themselves. There are cases that are taken to the chief for them to be discussed. Therefore, Dr. Zenzile and myself, we decided that since GBV is rife in South Africa, and all these legislations that have been developed in attempt to reduce the GBV, how about we look into traditional leaders playing a crucial role of tapping into the space of GBV and assisting in eradicating the scourge of GBV. And just to mention on that, the traditional leader is one of the oldest institutions in South Africa, and it's recognized by the South African governments through the Traditional Leader and Governments Frame Act of 2003, Act number 41 of 2003. So this is an old institution that was introduced around 2003 in South Africa, where they were brought into into playing a part as the traditional leader to try and assist keep the scourge of GBV within our society. And the reason for that is because in our rural areas, we've got so many people that still believes in chieftaincy. We've got so many people that still believe in the house of the traditional leaders. So they will still obey the rules that are set out by the traditional leaders within their society, which makes it relevant in a sense that should a GBV case take place within the rural areas, therefore, if it is reported and therefore if the chief around that community, if it's aware of it, then they tap into that space in trying to assist keeping that scarce, mainly because the people in the areas, in the rural areas, because they believe strongly in them, whatever that they set out as a rule, people tend to obey those rules. Now, a little bit of the background of who are the traditional leaders and what do they do and the impact that they have in our society. South African Traditional Leaders and Governments Framework Amendment Act of number 23 of 2009 grants traditional leaders the constitutional authority to address conflicts, including GBV, particularly in the rural areas. I've already alluded that they are granted the authority to tap into that space and help assist within our rural areas in eradicating the scourge, not only of GBV, but GBV is one of them, but any issue that might emanate within their communities, within their rural communities, they tap into and play the role of trying to come up with solution and setting the standard of creating a free rural area that is free of any type of crime. Traditional leaders are some of the custodian of cultural traditional leaders in the corporate governments and traditional affairs, which is also known as culture in South Africa, which consists of the chief, the headman, and the village heads, play a crucial role in community governments and have various responsibility in community life, including land allocation, dispute of settlement, conflict of resolutions, rural development, education, and the reinforcement of social norms. So this is just an emphasis that they play a crucial role within our community members, particularly in the rural areas. When you are in need of a stand, these are the people that you consult within the rural areas of South Africa. You don't just go and find an open land and start cutting yourself an own stand, but there's a protocol or a hierarchy that has been followed within our rural areas where one can be allocated a land, and if there's a dispute between community members, these are the people that community members will go and consult in terms of resolving the matters around that community. Therefore, the link between traditional leader in African culture is a strong one. Traditional leaders are influenced in most rural communities in Southern Africa and play a key role in advocating and driving social mobilization initiatives that address gender-based violence, as alluded by Ubuntu Institute in the year 2008. So as I've already mentioned earlier on, traditional leaders in the South African rural area communities, they are we've got what we have chiefs and headmen, which play a crucial role in terms of mobilizing harmony within our communities. These are the people that our communities within the rural areas, they go to in consultation of a whole lot of conflicts that might arise within our communities, meaning the community members in rural areas, they strongly believe in the guidance of a chieftaincy and a headman, and as well as village heads, leaders as well. So there's so many things that the chief, as well as the village heads, and as well as the headmen assist our community members in terms of resolving conflicts within our community leaders, particularly in the rural area. Therefore, traditional leaders preside over customary law courts that exercise legislative power and which maintain law and order in communities at grassroots level. As much as they are given the platform to assist, their main focus, the traditional leaders, it is mainly at the rural areas where people are still rooted in their culture and they still believe strongly in their culture. Although some of them, they do understand how the modern life or how the South Africa has transformed from believing strongly in culture, and it has incorporated, the modern ways of doing things. But people in the rural areas, they still believe that traditional leaders are the heads of their villages, and they still abide or obey the rules set out by the traditional leaders. Therefore, traditional leaders reach thousands of people in their communities through imbizos/lokotlas or community dialogues. So these are the chiefs and the headmen, and as well as the village heads, which now and then, often depending, it varies from one community to the other. If there's an issue, a burning issue that is affecting their community, they call what we have imbizo, which simply means a gathering of all community members who comes together to come and discuss the burning issues that are taking place or experienced by community members within their community members. This is how now the traditional leaders reach out to community members to discuss burning issues and listen to the community members and their grievances and come up with a solution to best eradicate whatever issue that could be burning. And GBV not excluded as one of the burning issues, since it is declared as a rifle globally. So they advise government on traditional affairs and the influence policy making that affects the lives of millions of people in mostly rural population. Traditional leaders are highly respected and influential in their communities. People turn to them for guidance and solution to different challenges they might face. Like mentioned earlier on, people within South African rural areas still strongly believe in the leadership of traditional leaders within their communities. And with that said, now we had to look into the importance of the rationale of the study. Why is this study important? Obviously, as alluded earlier, GBV is being declared as a rifle or a pandemic in South Africa. It is consistent. There's GBV that takes place, or a case of GBV that is reported almost every day in South Africa. Just not so long ago, on Monday, another female law enforcement officer has been reported to have killed her partner and also took her own life. So it's something that we experience it on daily basis. And with the legislation put in place, we are still now questioning what more can be done to try and eradicate, because policies, we do have the relevant policies that are meant to eradicate the phenomena of GBV, but it's still increasing on daily basis. Therefore, the rationale of the study is that globally there is a current call for a paradigm shift in the manner which citizens defines crime and act thereof. Other movements are ingrained in restorative justice, which is deemed to be deviating from retribute justice. Currently, the focus is on knowledge and addressing harms, needs, obligations, and getting at causes of what really causes GBV. Whereas while Bullock 2014 opines that this paves a way for citizen participation in collective activities and afford members to articulate interests, values, and wishes of their communities. Therefore, traditional leaders need to be integrated in the restorative justice, which provides victims with the opportunity to have a voice in the underneath of crime. Traditional leaders, as they hold strategic position within their communities, their participation in addressing GBV, it's needed to strengthen the community and also for community members to, because we strongly believe that traditional leaders in our rural areas, they are still being listened to by community members. Should they tap in and assist whatever rule that any traditional leader might set out for their community members? We strongly believe, or we strongly are of the opinion, that people would listen to the rules and set out regulations set out by the traditional leaders to try and cap the phenomena of gender-based violence within our communities. Therefore, we are of the view that them stepping into and assisting in addressing their communities, it might actually help eradicate the phenomena of GBV within our communities. Now, this paper, for it to reach findings that we were looking, or answers that we were looking to, questions that we were looking to answer, it was guided by the following objectives: to delineate the magnitude of the phenomenon of GBV within the presence of traditional leaders, to elucidate actions undertaken by victims of GBV in the underneath of the incident as determined by norms and values of the society in which they live in, and to recommend measures that can be implemented by traditional leaders to curtail GBV in areas of their jurisdictions. So the paper had to follow, or rather answer, the certain objectives which I've just outlined in order for us to evaluate or analyze if really now incorporating traditional leaders as a solution might actually yield better results, or might actually assist in terms of assisting the current policies that are being implemented in trying to eradicate the GBV within the South African country. So we look into the literature. Other scholars have written about it. Other scholars have looked into it. And in our literature review, we've highlighted studies that have conducted research pertaining to traditional leaders as one of the stakeholders that can also assist in keeping the schedule of GBV. A study conducted by Gender Links, which served 5,621 South African in 4 provinces, revealed that 77 of women in Limpopo, 51 women in Gauteng, 45% of women in the Western Cape, and 36% of women in KZN reported experiencing GBV. Obviously, the figures, they keep changing every day based on what I've just alluded earlier, that South Africa experiences a case of between 1 and 10, which has been reported where a GBV have taken place between either be a relative, a colleague, or between 2 different genders. It doesn't matter whether you are in an intimate relationship or not. While 78% of the male participants in Gauteng agreed to have perpetrated violence against women. Several decades ago, prevention and reducing the escalation of GBV were mainly known to be responsibility of the police organizations. Such understanding and practices could be premised to the fact that police were entrusted with the responsibility of citizen safety. However, this notion has somewhat lost its relevancy in the 21st century, because obviously because of the world transformation, the 21st century, we are now aware that a lot of things have evolved, and it is now not only the responsibility of the law enforcers or the police themselves to now help eradicate this, but it is a responsibility of every community member to try and assist keep the scourge of gender-based violence. Even though women are the most reported victims of gender-based violence, research shows that men too can be victims. The World Health Organization 2021 has alluded that in South Africa, we do also have men who experiences gender-based violence, although it might not be in the same rate or in the same figures as women are and a girl child are, but we do have men that are also experiencing gender-based violence in South Africa. Today, it is worth studying the role of traditional leaders in reducing GBV in South Africa since they greatly influence their followers. It is within this understanding that the study is premised. And obviously the study under research design and methodology, it was a qualitative study in nature, because through qualitative, both the researchers were able to get a depth understanding of how can the traditional leaders play a role, what role can they play, and how can they best assist the current policies implemented by the South African government to try and eradicate the GBV scourge in South Africa. So the study took place between Limpopo and the Eastern Cape provinces. Both the provinces is because both the co-authors have had previously, they conducted a research while they were doing their thesis, and this emanates from both the thesis conducted by both doctors, hence the collaboration of 2 different provinces. And the sampling size of this paper, it was a total of 68 participants, 10 of which were from the Limpopo province, and 58 of which were from the Eastern Cape in the King, Sabata, Darling, Debo, Nxeki Hill, Eandeni, Port St. John's, and Lusikisiki local municipalities. And the data collected, we used the semi-structured interviews where we now spoke to our participant, which enabled them to go in depth in explaining how the traditional leaders can play a crucial role in assisting GBV. And then through the interviews that were semi-structured interviews that were held with our participants, through the data that was analyzed, themes came out from those data that was analyzed, and we had 5 themes emanating from the data that was analyzed and presented. And theme number 1, as a result of the data that was analyzed and interpreted, was that the reality of GBV phenomena in the present of traditional leaders. So therefore, there's definitely GBV that is taking place in rural areas. And through the theme number 1, we had now to describe how does the traditional leaders handle the GBV incidents and crime within their precincts of their local municipalities or their rural areas? And the participant number 32 alluded that we try to mediate the situation and find a way of reconciling two parties that are involved, which simply means that House of Traditional Leaders will now look into the two people that have reported gender-based violence to their offices or to their chieftaincy houses, and they try and mediate between the two parties, being it the victim and be it the perpetrator at that particular time. And then theme number 2, we had to look into the traditional leaders' response. What is their response when these cases are being reported to them? What strategies do they have as traditional leaders in trying to assist curb this GBV within their jurisdictions? And participant number 35 alluded that in my community, I ensure people are taught about their role and responsibility when there is crime committed. As a result, when there is an allegation of crime committed, each member becomes involved in the investigation of a culprit, because these are the head villages, these are the chiefs, these are the village heads as well. What they do is, when they give out a word or an instruction to all the community members, people tend to adhere to the instruction or the word of mouth given to them, or the instruction given to them. So if a community member has reported GBV within their communities, what now they do is that the chief will give a clear instruction that if this person has committed GBV or has perpetrated GBV, everyone must be part of the investigation team, meaning every community must play a role. Come forward, tell us what you've seen, so that a proper investigation can take place. So what that leads the whole community to is, now the whole community becomes involved in solving this problem of GBV. It doesn't only become an issue of two people, but the entire community becomes part of solving and conducting a proper investigation. And theme 3 was looking at the role and the influence of traditional leaders. We examined how traditional leaders impact or influence responses to GBV, because they are really listened by their followers, which are their community members. What is their role? How do they best influence? Meaning, can they set out certain rules of punishing the perpetrators of GBV, and can people really adhere to those rules? And participant number 9 alluded that community members trust traditional leaders to guide them through complex social issues, including GBV. These leaders are seen as custodian of culture and tradition. So what really that simply means is that, because the traditional leaders are trusted by community members in South Africa, whatever rule that they set out, their followers will definitely adhere to the rules laid out by them. They do as they are told. They still strongly believe in respecting their traditional leaders within communities. And theme number 4 was collaboration and conflict with modern legal system. Now that the world has transformed, now that we are living in modern society, although we still have rural areas in South Africa, how does having the transformation contradict or brings challenge to how things were done back in the days through the House of the Traditional Leaders? And through that, we had to analyze the interaction between the traditional leaders and the modern legal framework, which is the current policies that we have. And participant number 5 alluded that traditional leaders prioritize reconciliation and maintaining community harmony, possibly encouraging victims to forget the perpetrator, which can be an odd with the modern legal system. So the shortfall or the limitation on the side of the traditional leaders is that, because they are advocating for for community harmony, at some point they would want to deal with GBV as a family matter, meaning they would want to cancel both the victim and the perpetrator and encourage each other to forgive each other. Whereas through the modern legal framework, that's not how it works. If you are found to be being the perpetrator of GBV, you need to take accountability, and justice must take its course, meaning a person must be punished for the crime they've committed. And theme number 5, reviving tradition. Now we looked into, since we have the House of the Traditional Leaders, which has been an institution that was introduced in 2003 in South Africa, meaning it's a well-known institution within South Africa. And then we've got the modern legal framework. How do we now reintroduce, to House of the Traditional Leaders, which it is now modernized, will take into account how the world has evolved. And then we had to look in the role of the reintroduction of the practices in modern community governments. And participant number 10 alluded that traditional government structures often prioritize the voice of elders, men, or specific lineage, which most of the times leaves out women. So because House of the Traditional Leaders, it's mainly embedded on culture, and within our South African culture, men are given more priority than women, meaning even through the chieftaincy, a voice of a man is more heard than a voice of a woman. Therefore, they participant in alluded that perhaps by reintroducing it again, where it serves a purpose of inclusivity, where every person, women are also becomes part of the solution. Women also become part of the chieftaincy, and they play a role of encouraging other women to speak up, and encouraging other women and assuring other women that when you speak up, your voice will be heard. That is what they alluded, the participant alluded. And after the results have been, the themes have been formulated, we now had to look into everything, bring the paper together and look at what could be the solution. And in that solution, which is our conclusion, what is the way forward from now on going forward? Majority of the participants alluded that through chieftaincies, many of settlement within both jurisdictions are still administered by chiefs. House of Traditional Leaders within the country should be allocated budget and resources to increase awareness of GBV inflicted amongst all genders. The role of traditional leaders in curbing gender-based violence within communities actively as custodians of culture. Traditional leader can facilitate the creation of protective cultural environment in their communities. They have significant influence and can promote positive and culturally sensitive behavior change and address socio-cultural norms and beliefs that fuel the continuation of GBV. They can also confront GBV in all its forms, including cultural norms, beliefs, and practices that increase risk of perpetuation of such crime. Traditional leaders are also able to enforce customary law in traditional courts. In addition to this, they have wide range in their communities through various traditional forums. Such opportunities can be used to inform community members of the adverse impact of GBV. Their influence should be leveraged to promote protective practices and advocate for a society free from gender-based violence. So in a nutshell, we are simply saying traditional leaders, they can continue playing their part. However, let them now include ladies. Let it be a house of traditional leaders that is inclusive of all women and a girl child in their decision-making board. And can they also tap into a space where certain cultural norms and belief and practices can be revisited, and they can be, you know, amendments made where men it's more important than a woman, where they speak of community harmony, where if a case of GBV is reported, they actually advocate for forgiveness instead of people taking account, promoting the perpetrators to take accountability and allow justice to be served. So in a nutshell, again, colleagues, there's a role that traditional leaders can play, particularly in the South African rural areas. They are listened to, they've got followers, and if they come on board and actively are given the resources, you know, to go out and make awareness campaign, it actually lead to a solution of reducing the GBV rifle in South Africa. Thank you.